Hello, thank you for joining with me. We are reading with the Course Companion Group, day 157, Cameo 22, The Return of His Will. And if you will please close your eyes and join me for prayer. Dear Father, if left to my own devices, my perception will be skewed. I surrender to you everything that I think and feel. God, please take my past, plan my future. Send your Spirit to redeem my mind that I might be set free. May I be your channel, God, and serve the world. May I become who you would have me be, do what you would have me do, go where you would have me go, and say what you would have me say, and to whom. God, please enable me to set aside everything I think I know for an open mind and a new experience. With the Course in Miracles, with this reading of Cameo 22, with myself, God, with my brother, with this world, and most especially with you, God. Please give me your vision. Amen. And here we are, Cameo 22, The Return of His Will. Just days after the personal message given on September 13th and 14th, 1966, and footnote 1 says Cameo 21, which we just read recently. Helen received another one, this one for Bill. It came in the notes right after what is now section 3 of chapter 12 of the text, looking at the cause of fear, and is found in the special messages dated September 16th, 1966. There it is preceded by this question: why is W.T. William Thetford more depressed than usual? We know that Bill was experiencing depression around this time from a journal he kept during August and September of 1966. In his September 11 and September 13 entries, he mentions feeling depressed a number of times. For instance, he begins his entry for September 13th with this: great difficulty in getting up, feeling of generalized fatigue, etc., as a continuation of previous depression. Found difficulty in changing this mood state, but improved as day continued. 2. Absence from Felicity 305. Though Bill is aware of feeling depressed, it is easy for us to imagine him being surprised at how Jesus, through Helen, explains that depression. He is in a very deep sleep and much more resistant to waking than you are. The major problem with him is that his is a passive resistance, which implies a giving over of will. This always induces a state of resignation and therefore depression. Tell him that no one can resign from the sonship, since membership is not optional. He has been looking for someone to take his will away because he thought it was the cause of his trouble. Since the Course has placed such consistent emphasis on will, and since he agrees with the emphasis, his past adjustment is threatened. That is why he could not sleep. His past came to haunt him because he is giving up the belief in ghosts. Tell him again not to be afraid of ghosts and remind him that he has no past. The return of his will is what he wants. No one can accept it but himself. And then footnote 3. All quotations without page numbers in this cameo are from the notes. This brief message gives a novel explanation for why Bill is more depressed than usual. It begins by saying that Bill is resistant to waking more so than Helen. Yet, unlike Helen's upfront resistance, his resistance is passive. It does not appear to be an act of will. Rather, it seems to be a fact of his nature beyond his control. As such, he has become resigned to it. In his eyes, he is constitutionally unable to awaken, and that's that. This conclusion may be depressing, yet the whole situation is an illusion that Bill himself has erected. The root of this is that he has decided that his will was the cause of his trouble. Clearly, his will had done things in the past that he regretted, which explains the reference to being haunted by the ghosts of the past. Thus, he voluntarily gave his will over, pulled the plug on it. His will had offended him, and so he tried to cut it off. As a result, he now apparently has no will, and that means he seems to have no strong desire, no drive, and no real power of choice. Yet these are the very things he needs if he is to wake up and remember that he is a cherished member of the sonship. To be resigned to having no will, then, is really an attempt to resign from the sonship. Yet no one can really do this, Jesus says, since membership is not optional. Rather than face awakening, Bill has settled for this depressing state of affairs. This is the bargain he has made to maintain his equilibrium. And this brings us to why he is more depressed now than usual. The reason is that the Course has been trying to shake him out of this. The Course has placed such consistent emphasis on will. Moreover, Bill agrees with the emphasis. Thus, the alive and active will that Bill has put to sleep is at last beginning to rise from its chains. The result is inevitable. His past adjustment is threatened. He is not just depressed, but also deeply unsettled, so much so that he could not sleep. In Bill's journal, on September 15th, the day before this guidance came, he actually mentions having trouble sleeping. I did not sleep particularly soundly during the night. A vague awareness from time to time that a great deal of unconscious material was being stirred up. Perhaps this deals with the beginning release of repression. Footnote 4. Absence from Felicity 307. Bill senses, in other words, that material he has pushed down in his unconscious is now rising to the surface. Perhaps because his work with the Course is bringing about the beginning release of repression. In his message through Helen, Jesus agrees with this and makes it more specific. What is surfacing in Bill is specifically his will's past misdeeds. Now that his will is rising from the grave, the ghost of its past sins are rising with it, coming back to haunt him so that his sleep is now disturbed by a restless conscience. This is similar to what we see in the Shield report in Cameo 5, where when Esther finally hears that she is forgiven, she will be afraid for a long time because she will remember many things, i.e. many loveless acts of hers, consciously or unconsciously. Now we can better understand why Bill believes that it is safer to keep his will locked in the vault. And yet there is literally no need to. He has no reason to be afraid of the misdeeds of the past because he has no past. His will is not the source of trouble that he fears it is. Rather, the return of his will is what he wants. He can welcome his will back with joy because once it is truly unchained, its gentle strength will carry him to the only place he has ever wanted to be, home. Day 157, Cameo 22, The Return of His Will. These are Robert Perry's notes, his commentary on this section. I don't know about you, but when I read the stories about Helen and Bill, I always relate more to Bill. I definitely relate to him in this cameo. I am not prone to depression now, but I was prone to very mild depression, more of a listlessness, really, when I was a young adult. For stretches of time, everything seemed devoid of meaning. Why feel a lot or expend a lot of energy when everything was just so meaningless? So I can relate to Bill's state of resignation. I hadn't yet built a mental framework in which reality was meaningful. I also felt quite separate from the world and humanity, which reminds me of Bill's thought that he could resign from the sonship. I also very much relate to Bill's sense of disconnection from his will. I know that making choices and taking action are part of life, but something in me secretly wishes they weren't. Finally, I relate to Bill's passive resistance to awakening, in that not being spiritually awake doesn't seem to be an act of will on my part. Rather, it seems to be a fact of my nature that I have no power over. What I don't relate to, however, is the idea that I have tried to give over my will because it was the cause of my trouble, having done bad things in the past. I'm saying I don't relate, but that doesn't mean it's not true. I suspect this element pertains to me as well, but it is just hidden in my unconscious. It's an unsettling idea. Who wants to believe that they are moved by unconscious forces? But it's also an intriguing one. So this is something I need to think about. Could it be that I'm really disconnected from my will? Could it be that I am disconnected from my will because I'm so afraid of the destructive things it has done and might still do? Could it be that I think it's safer to have no will than to have a destructive will? Is it possible that if I knew that my will was purely loving, I would feel safe in letting it out? The message I'm taking away from this cameo is that I need to reclaim my will. After all, it is the engine of my awakening. Unless I unleash its drive, its desire, and its power of choice, I can only travel very slowly along the path to God, along the way to God. I hope I'm not being too autobiographical. Thank you, autobiographical with this. I'm sure many of you relate more to Helen, who had no trouble, it seems, using her will. With her, the question was whether she would use it in the right direction, but I expect that there are others of us who relate more to Bill, and who therefore need to ask ourselves the questions that arise from this guidance. Have I disconnected from my will? Why have I done so? Do I have an unconscious fear of the destructive power of my will? How can I reclaim my will for the sake of my journey home? I don't relate to Bill on this. I don't feel like I struggle with that, but again, it could be unconscious. I can be prone to depression even now, mild depression. It's certainly not extreme. But when I forget who I am and get caught up in this world, I certainly see that veil being drawn. And I can certainly relate to a sense of disconnection or separateness. I wouldn't say so much from my will. I guess it is from my will, if it's from everything else. Anyway, thank you so much for joining with me. This is the commentary for day 157, Cameo 22, The Return of His Will. I love you.